Hey Optimancers, Chris here. Today I want to do my 11th wizard build. I've done 10 wizard builds already for all the subclasses that we found in sources up to earlier this year. But earlier this year, Explorer's Guide to Wildmount came out and we got 2 new subclasses of wizard, and I want to do a build for one of those. Now we have the Chronergist wizard and the Graviturgist wizard, and in general, I think the Chronergist wizard is more powerful just because their subclass abilities are more powerful. But if we look at the spells, the Dunamancy spells, and if we read Explorer's Guide to Wildmount, there's good reason to think that if you're not playing one of these 2 wizards, you wouldn't have access to those spells. Your DM may allow you access to some of them. There's a little bit of information how that could happen, but I wouldn't expect it. So if I want to cast those Dunamancy spells, I'm probably going to have to play one of these 2 subclasses. Now, whether a Graviturgist wizard can cast Chronergy spells, that is up for debate. It doesn't say specifically in the book that they can't, but it's kind of implied, and I have seen now online reviews of Dunamancy magic where they believe that that's the case, that Graviturgy magic is only available to Graviturgist wizards, and the same thing for Chronergy wizards. Now, if that's the belief, even if it's not written in stone in the book, then we should assume that our DM may have that opinion. So what I want to do is access the Graviturgy spells. I think I need to make a Graviturgist wizard. Now, the thing about these kinds of spells is they are primarily blasting spells. So, like an evoker, we would expect this character to do a lot of blasting. But there's 2 kinds of blasting spells. There's blasting spells that just do damage, and then there's blasting spells that do damage and they do something else. And the Graviturgy magic tends to do the latter. So we're going to do a little bit of damage, not as much as if we did just a pure blast, but we're going to do something else. And usually that involves movement in some way. We're going to move the enemies around, we're going to pull them to a specific spot, or we're going to slow down their movement. So one way or the other, we're affecting their movement. And it so happens that the subclass itself also has some movement related things, so we can alter creatures' movements not only with our subclass abilities but with our spells as well. So we put all that together, and what we have is a wizard that actually is going to operate more as a god wizard than as a blaster. But blasting will be a part of it, so we are going to be controlling the battlefield, but we are also going to be delivering damage. So that's kind of a nice combination. You get a little bit of both worlds. So if you want to play a god wizard who's also going to do damage, this is a good way to go. Now, the one thing about this build is this is not a build that's going to operate well in a vacuum. In other words, on its own, this build isn't all that powerful. This is really a build that is going to work well in a team. Now, fortunately, when we play D&D, we tend to work in teams, so that shouldn't be a problem in most campaigns. But I'm going to show you how the spells here, the abilities here, can work well with these spells and abilities that we might expect other party members to have. And if you want to talk to your other players before you start making this build, that's not a bad idea. I'd like to take just a moment to thank some of my patrons who are helping this channel and helping me create this content. So today I would like to do a shout out for Leighton Hagland, Awesome Face, Yunru, and Takusan. And they have all been Archmage subscribers, really helping out this channel. If you would like to join my Patreon, there is a link in the video description. Again, I would like to thank these patrons who have given me such support. So let's get back to the video. So this video is going to be long, so I'm actually going to be splitting it up. So today what we're going to do is we're going to talk about this build at lower levels. So we're going to go from level 1 through level 5. Then with our next video, we're going to be talking about mid-levels. So we're going to go from level 6 and take it to level 11. And then we are going to do a video for the high level, so level 12 through level 19. I'm not going to worry about level 20 for this particular build. And then finally, we're going to do a 4th video. And that 4th video, what we're going to do is we're going to look at a grid map. We're going to show what this character can do with spells and how this character can work with other party members to help them be effective as well. Because remember, this isn't just a blast build, this is a god controller build. And so we want to show how this character can help other party members be more effective. So that is what is coming. Let's get started. So our tactical blaster, we're going to need to access critical role content and Eberron content. Now, the Eberron content is purely because of the multiclass I'm using here, and if you are not able to access Eberron, and you may not be able to because critical role content is specifically for Wildmount, Eberron content is specifically for Eberron. So if there is a problem with the consistency here, I'll give you an alternative. So when it comes to race, we have pretty wide open options here because any race that gets a bonus to intelligence is going to do fine as a Graviturgist wizard. Now what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be taking a gnome, and I think I'm going to go with the rock gnome. The rock gnome gives a lot of great things for a wizard. Number one, the bonus to intelligence. We're getting a +2 intelligence. This is for any kind of gnome, and that makes any kind of gnome a pretty decent wizard. But in addition, rock gnome's getting a bonus to constitution, and constitution, if you are a wizard, is really important because number one, we're going to have less hit points than most other party members, so any bonus to constitution actually as a ratio gives us a bigger boost. The second thing is constitution saving throws. Constitution saving throws come up a lot, and when you're a spellcaster, even more so because they are concentration saving throws. In addition, Gnome gives us lots of other good stuff. We're going to get Dark Vision of 60 feet. We're going to get Gnome Cunning. That's going to give us advantage on Intelligence, Wisdom, and Charisma saving throws against magic. Intelligence and Charisma saving throws versus magic are relatively rare, but Wisdom saving throws come up a lot. And because of the way we're going to be multiclassing this character, we're not going to have proficiency in Wisdom saves, so getting advantage on those rolls could really help us out when we are targeted with a spell that's going to target our Wisdom. Then we're going to get Artificer's Lore, and this is just going to help us make intelligence history rolls related to magic items, alchemical objects, technological devices, and basically we get twice our proficiency bonus, so it's like expertise. And this tends to be something that you need to rely on your DM to give you once in a while. It's good to remind them, hey, I have Artificer's Lore, can I use it to help me determine what this magic item is? And then the last thing we get is Tinker, because rock gnomes are tinker gnomes. They are able to create little clockwork devices, and we get this. It's largely flavor, but there can be some utility uses for our clockwork devices. So as I mentioned, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to grab Artificer. This is an Eberron class, but it does say in a sidebar in the book it's in that the Artificer could be found in other campaign worlds as well. So that's kind of what I'm relying on here, is that there probably are Artificers in Wildmount. Now, as long as we can take Artificer, it's really good. And I have not taken Artificer with any of my other wizard builds simply because Artificer wasn't around yet. Now that Artificer is around, I would say that Artificer is the strongest single level dip a wizard can have. There are a number of reasons Artificer is really good. The first, hit die is going to be a little bit better. We're going to start with a couple extra hit points. And our saving throws are going to be Constitution and Intelligence. And Constitution is the saving throw you want to have when you are a spellcaster. In addition, we're going to be able to use medium armor and shields. It is going to give us a significantly better starting armor class. We get Magical Tinkering. That's actually going to kind of complement our racial ability of Tinker. Again, mostly thematical stuff, but occasionally utility uses. And we're going to get spellcasting. And the great thing about Artificer is, although it is a half-casting class, in other words, it progresses its spellcasting at half the rate that a full spellcaster normally does, it does round up. So if we have one level of Artificer in a multiclass, it is treated the same as having one level of a full spellcaster. So what it means is, when it comes to our spell slots, we are going to have the full progression that we would have if we went straight wizard. So we're going to get 3 starting proficiencies, 2 skills, and 1 tool. The first skill I'm going to take is Perception. Fortunately, that is available on the Artificer skill list. And the second one I'm going to take is History, because that's going to work in with my Artificer lore. And then we're going to choose a tool, and you could choose whatever you like. With this character, I'm going to take Cartographer's tool, so that's for mapping. Then we're going to set our ability scores, and I'm going to use a point buy here. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put my intelligence to 14. That's going to give me a total of 16 for my starting intelligence. And I'm going to put my constitution to 15. That's going to give me a 16 starting constitution. So not only am I going to have constitution saving throws as a proficiency, I am also going to have a higher starting constitution than most wizards. So that is going to give me really good concentration saves. It's also going to really help my hit points. But I also want to get a dexterity of 14. A dexterity of 14 is going to be perfect to work with my medium armor to give me the best armor class possible. That leaves me 4 additional points, and I'm just going to throw them into Wisdom. Wisdom's pretty useful for us to have as well because saving throws are often Wisdom, and it is also the ability score that we use for our Perception. So now we're going to pick our background. You can pick whatever you like. It doesn't really matter all that much. I'm going to pick Far Traveler because this is going to be a character that has traveled far to join the Kryn dynasty, become a Dunamancer. That's going to give us the Insight skill proficiency, and we're going to be able to choose 1 additional skill. And I'm going to choose Arcana because I am going to be a wizard and Arcana is thematically appropriate. Then we're going to get an additional tool proficiency, but this is going to be a musical instrument or a gaming set. And again, doesn't really matter what you pick. I, with this character, am going to just take a lute. Then we're going to get a language, and I'm going to take Elvish, and I'm going to assume this is probably the dialect for Drow. Because the Kryn dynasty is largely Drow, so I would probably pick up that language as I'm learning to be a Dunamancer. Then we're going to go into our equipment, and our starting equipment, we're going to choose 2 simple weapons. Remember, we're already going to start with a light crossbow and 20 bolts. So what I'm going to do here, it doesn't matter. I'm just going to take a couple daggers. And then we're going to start with scale mail armor and thieves' tools and a dungeoneer's pack. Now, as always with an Artificer, we are not going to start with a shield, but we're going to want to get a shield as soon as we can. Shields aren't overly expensive. They only cost 10 gold pieces. So it's reasonable that we might be able to start with a shield even if we switch off some other equipment. If not, then we can get a shield probably relatively early in the campaign. And finally, we're going to select our spells. We're going to start with 2 cantrips. And we're going to have a lot of cantrips with this character, and they're all going to rely on our intelligence, so that's good. Now, Thorn Whip is the one I'm going to pick first for this character. So what Thorn Whip does is it is a melee attack, but it can target somebody up to 30 feet away. So it is actually practically more like a ranged attack. And when we hit a creature with it does a little bit of damage, d6, and that scales as cantrips normally do. But we also pull the creature 10 feet towards us. This character is going to be all about pushing and pulling enemies where we want them to be. Thorn Whip is the perfect cantrip for this character. Second cantrip I'm going to pick is Guidance. Guidance is a great cantrip to have. Normally not available for arcane spellcasters, but artificers are the exception, so it is a good one for us to take right now because we will not have access to it later. Then we are going to get 3 prepared spells. And what I'm going to take here is Fairy Fire. Now, Fairy Fire isn't a spell I'm necessarily going to be casting at higher levels, but at lower levels, when you are an Artificer, it's probably your best bet. It's an area of effect spell, targets dexterity saves, and those that fail their save, our allies are going to have advantage on attacking them. It's also going to prevent them from turning invisible. Then I'm going to pick Absorb Elements. This is a good reaction defensive spell when you're targeted with all kinds of different elemental damage. And the final spell I'm going to take is Cure Wounds. And this is largely because when I go into Wizard, these kinds of spells just don't exist for me. So having Cure Wounds with a Wizard style character is actually a pretty good thing to do. And Cure Wounds in this case is going to be based on our intelligence, so it's going to get the biggest modifier, far more so than if we were to say multi-class Cleric. Now this character is going to have proficiency also in Thieves' Tools and Tinker's Tools. We got Thieves' Tools through our background. We can also use those Thieves' Tools as our spellcasting focus for Artificer spells. The Tinker's Tools, however, we don't have. And so if we want Tinker's Tools, they're relatively expensive, 50 gold if memory serves. So this is something that we'll just want to put on our wish list and pick it up later when 50 gold isn't such a big deal. So as a first level character, we're essentially going to be treating this character like a straight Artificer. So they're probably going to use the crossbow most of the time and Fairy Fire for kind of a big gun spell in combat that we can do a couple times. Or if need be, if there's an emergency, a Cure Wounds. So we're going to go back in and now we're going to begin our journey with Wizard. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to be adding Wizard, and I'm going to start out with taking 2 levels right off the bat. And that's just going to make us a Graviturgist Wizard right from the beginning. So with our class features, we're going to go to our Arcane Tradition and choose Graviturgist. And what that'll do is it'll give us our first subclass feature, which is Adjust Density, which I think is the least flashy of all their abilities. But what it does is you can target a creature or an object that you can see within 30 feet, and you can double its weight or you can half its weight. Now, if that's a creature, then what it'll do is if you double its weight, it's going to slow it down by 10 feet, but it's going to get advantage on strength saves and strength ability checks. Well, if you go the other way and you make it lighter, it will increase its speed by 10 feet, but it gets disadvantage on those same checks and saves. Now you have to concentrate on this ability. But if we have an enemy, let's say we're chasing an enemy, and we want to catch them, adjust density would be a way that we can slow them down. They get no saving throw. Then we could hit them with that thorn whip and pull them in as well. So we're already finding ways we can affect the battlefield by adjusting the maneuverability of our enemies. We're also going to get Arcane Recovery. We're going to get this right at first level of Wizard. And what it's going to do is when we take a short rest, we can recover a spell. When we increase our Wizard level, we'll be able to get more spells back. Now we're going to begin with 3 cantrips, and there's a little bit of question here. I do not know for certain, because there is a Dunamancy cantrip. It's called Sapping Sting. It's right here, and I will be selecting it. I don't know for certain if Sapping Sting is available to first level wizards. And the reason I don't know that is because, technically speaking, you can't be a Dunamancer wizard until you get to second level and you choose a subclass of Graviturgy or Chronergy magic. Now, in our case, I'm taking 2 levels, so Sapping Sting is showing up here. But I'll tell you that on D&D Beyond, if I select a first level wizard, it does not allow me to pick Sapping Sting, which I think is kind of dumb. And I don't think most DMs would play it that way. If your character is an evolving Dunamancy wizard, at first level, of course, you don't have the subclass yet. That doesn't mean you're not part of the Kryn dynasty. That doesn't mean you're not learning Dunamancy magic, as far as I can see. So I would think Sapping Sting should be available to first level wizards, even though they don't have those subclasses. But I just want to let you know, if you make a first level wizard and you don't see Sapping Sting on your list, that's why. So if you can't select Sapping Sting at first level, if that's what your DM says, then you will have to wait to 4th level. Not a huge deal. Sapping Sting isn't a really important feature for this particular build, but what I will say about Sapping Sting is, for this kind of character, a character that is trying to control the movement of other creatures, it is a cantrip I want on my list. I would say it is less flashy than Thorn Whip, but what it will do is it'll do a d4 damage if it hits, and that scales. So that is terrible damage for a cantrip. But if a creature fails a Constitution saving throw, they are knocked prone. And the advantage of knocking prone, of course, is number 1, if you have allies that make melee attacks, as long as that creature doesn't move before those allies, they will get advantage on their attacks. But in addition, we are affecting the movement of the enemy, because for them to get up, they have to use half their movement. So we are cutting their movement in half if they fail their saving throw. And if we've already done something like doubled their weight, in that case, what we would be doing is we would be reducing by half an already lowered movement speed. So a creature may not be able to move much at all. And with both Thorn Whip and Sapping Sting, we're going into that theme where we're picking blasting spells that have a secondary effect. I'm going to get 2 other cantrips. First one I'm going to take is Minor Illusion. I've talked about Minor Illusion many times. It's a good cantrip. The second one I'm going to take is Mage Hand. Again, a very useful cantrip. More utility use, but it definitely comes up. Then we're going to be selecting 8 first level spells. So that's 6 for first level of Wizard and 2 for second level of Wizard. And I should mention that, technically speaking, you probably need to buy a spell book, because unless your DM is just going to give you one, and they might. A lot of DMs would give you a spell book if you multi-class into Wizard. I certainly would, but not all DMs will. It doesn't say in the player's handbook that you automatically get a spell book. So if you don't automatically get a spell book and your DM's not going to give you one, then you need to buy one. But once you buy one, you're at first level, you're going to get 6 spells, and at second level, we'll get 2 more. Now, remember with a wizard, they don't need to prepare the ritual spells. That's why I didn't bother with ritual spells with the Artificer, but with the wizard, I am definitely going to start taking my rituals. First ritual I'm going to take is Find Familiar, fantastic spell. Second ritual I'm going to take is Detect Magic, also a really good spell. Then I'm going to take Unseen Servant, again, utility-wise, I think a really good ritual. And finally, I'm going to take Comprehend Languages, which I also think is a really good ritual. Then I'm going to take 4 spells that I will be preparing. In fact, I'll be able to prepare 5 spells, so I'll probably start by preparing one of those rituals and switch it out later. And the very first spell I am definitely going to take is Magnify Gravity. Again, this one might not be available until your second level because it is a Graviturgist spell, just as I was talking about with the cantrips. But Magnify Gravity is the best blast there is at first level. It has a 60-foot range, creates a 10-foot radius sphere, so in terms of area, that's big for a first level spell. First level spells tend not to do radius spheres. They tend to do things like a 4-foot square or a 15-foot cone or a 3x3 grid. But in this case, 10-foot radius sphere means this is going to be a significantly bigger effect than any other blast at first level. And then the 60-foot range is unusually good for first level blast as well. Creatures hit within the sphere are going to be making constitution saving throws. They take 2d8 force damage, which is a good kind of damage. On a failed save, they take half if they make their save, and anyone who fails their save, their speed is halved until the end of the next turn. So once again, we're impacting the movement of creatures. The final thing it does, which is purely utility, is going to be super circumstantial, but if there's any objects that aren't being carried or worn, that are in the area of effect when you cast a spell, you actually have to make a strength check to pick it up. Second spell I'm going to take is Shield. Shield's a great way to boost our defense, and it's something that we're not necessarily going to need to cast because we're going to have a good armor class, but then when we cast it, we're going to have an amazing armor class. The next spell I'm going to grab is Grease. Now, what I like about Grease is it's not concentration. It's just a 10-foot square, so it's not very big. But what happens is when we cast it, any creature in the area makes a dexterity saving throw or they fall prone. In addition, though, any creature that enters the area of Grease also has to make that saving throw. And that makes this a really good spell for a Graviturgist wizard, because we have the ability to move enemies around. A lot of our spells do that. We already have spells like Thorn Whip that can pull an enemy. If we have a Grease spell up, that's not using up our concentration, we can then use a Thorn Whip, for example, to pull an enemy into the Grease area. So they're going to take the damage from the Thorn Whip, and then they're going to go into the Grease, make a dexterity saving throw, or fall prone. And as we move up in level, we're only going to get more spells that move enemies around. And in addition, our subclass abilities are going to aid with that as well. And the final spell I'm going to take at this level is a spell I normally don't take, and that is Earth Tremor. Now, Earth Tremor, what it does is it's an area of effect. So every creature within 10 feet of you makes a dexterity saving throw, and on a failed save, they take 1d6 bludgeoning damage, which is terrible damage for a first level spell. And they're knocked prone. So we can potentially knock a lot of creatures prone with an Earth Tremor, and that's the main reason we would take it. Because again, this is a character that can often adjust the ability of enemies to move. Earth Tremor does that. If they fall prone, in order to get up, they're using half their movement. In addition, the area around is treated as difficult terrain until cleared. So in addition to the creatures falling prone, now they have to get up, use half their movement for that, and now they're in difficult terrain. So if we consider a creature with a 30-foot movement, they fall, now they get up, now they have 15 movement left, they're in difficult terrain, they can only move one square. So this again is an example of one of those spells that does damage and has a secondary effect. And the secondary effect here is right up our alley. So in terms of preparing spells, we're going to prepare our Magnified Gravity, our Shield, we're going to prepare Grease, we're going to prepare Earth Tremor, and then we're going to prepare one additional spell. And these are all ritual spells, so I'd be looking for a spell that is a ritual spell, but I might want to be able to cast it on my turn. And the one that kind of I would think of is Unseen Servant. So at third level, of course, our spell slots increase significantly because we're going to have 4 first level spell slots, but we're also going to have 2 second level spell slots. Note that we don't have any second level spells yet, so we'd be looking at scaling spells like Earth Tremor or Magnified Gravity. And I do think Magnified Gravity would kind of be my go-to spell most of the time. So with that, we'd be doing 3d8. That's the same damage that we would get from a Shatter in a 10-foot radius, and we're getting a secondary effect on top of just the damage. So Magnified Gravity is probably as good as most second-level blast spells if we cast it with a second-level spell. Now our base armor class is 18 because of our Scale Mail and Shield. Ideally, we would probably want to upgrade to either a breastplate or half plate once we can afford to do so. But 18 is a good armor class for low levels, and because we have the shield spell, we can make it a 23 when we need to. So we're going to add 2 more levels of wizard, get us to a 5th level character, 4th level Graviturgist wizard. And what that'll get us is our first ability score improvement. And the ability score improvement I'd probably look at is taking a feat and taking Warcaster. The first reason we would want Warcaster is because it is going to give us advantage on most of our concentration saving throws. That's the main reason why a wizard will look at Warcaster. With this particular character, another thing I would point out is that the somatic components of spells, while we're holding other things, might be an issue. Because we can have a case where, let's say we want to cast Absorb Elements, and let's say we've had our hand free so we could use somatic components of wizard spells. that could be a problem for us because our absorb elements we got through Artificer. Artificers require a material component to cast spells. That material component needs to be like a set of Tinker's tools or Thieves' tools that they're holding. So if we are holding Tinker's tools or Thieves' tools and then we have a shield in our other hand, we don't have a free hand for somatic components. So that's probably not the way we're going to be most of the time. Most of the time we would want to have that one hand free. Unless we have Warcaster. If we have Warcaster, we need to have a shield or a weapon in one or both hands. Well, we have a shield in one hand, so we qualify even if we have tools in the other hand. We can now perform the somatic components of our spells while holding the spell focus we need for our Artificer spells. So this is an important combination and makes Warcaster really good for this particular build. Finally, hostile creatures, if they provoke attacks of opportunity from us, we can cast a spell instead. This is a character that's occasionally going to provoke attacks of opportunity. A lot of our spells require we get in reasonably close. A lot of our spells pull enemies into us. A lot of our spells reduce their ability to move. So if one of those enemies really wants to try to get away from us, then it's very possible they can't afford to do the disengage action, so they might provoke opportunity attacks from us. And when we can do things with our spells that prevent creatures from moving or move them where we want them to go, then that makes it really hard for enemies to get away from us. If they are an enemy that prefers to attack at range or cast spells or that kind of thing, those kind of enemies are going to be really screwed by this character. Now there's one Graviturgist spell we can select with our second level choices, and we're going to have 4 choices here, and that spell is a movable object, and I'm definitely going to be taking that. Now what a movable object does is it is a touch spell, so once again I'm talking about spells you need to get in close to cast. An immovable object, as long as we can get it in close, can be a really effective spell. So what it does is you are going to cast it on an object. That object can't weigh more than 10 pounds, and it becomes magically fixed in place, similar to what we would get with, say, an immovable rod. There's some pretty obvious utility uses for this, and note that we can move the item. So what you could do is you could have a stair, and you move up the stair, people get on it, and then they get on a ledge, and then you move the stair up again, and then that might give them a boost to get to the next ledge, etc., etc. We can also use this in combat, because we could cast this on the enemy sword, and if we cast it on the enemy sword, then they're not swinging that sword anymore. Potentially, we could even cast it on an item of clothing of an enemy. And if we cast it on the enemy's shirt, for example, they might not be able to move at all. And there's no saving throw here. So if we cast a movable object on a creature's weapon, for example, that weapon is out of the combat. So good utility uses, good combat uses. Does have the requirement, though, that we're going to need to be able to get in close. Once again, we'll be glad to have that Warcaster feat. Once again, we'll be glad to have armor and shield. We're going to pick 3 additional spells. The first one that just screams to me here is Web, because Web, again, is one of those area of effect spells that if we can get a creature inside it, can be really effective. But once a creature escapes, then normally they just don't enter the web again. But with this character, we're going to be pushing those enemies back into the web quite often. So we use our Thorn Whip, pull somebody back into the web, and now they have to make another saving throw or they're stuck again. So we can make web a lot more useful with this kind of character because we can move enemies into the web. Furthermore, we can make things really hard for enemies to get out of the web. Because if we have creatures in a web and then we hit them with a magnified gravity, their speed is halved. And the web is already treated as difficult terrain even if you make your saving throw. So once your speed is halved and you're dealing with difficult terrain, you may not be able to escape the web even if you make your save. And then once you do, I'm going to Thorn Whip you, pull you right back into it. Next spell I'm going to take is Misty Step. Let's say I have a web and an enemy has just escaped the web. If I want to pull them back in, I need to be on the opposite side of that web so I can make the use of the Thorn Whip. So things like Misty Step might be essential to get me in position so that I can pull them back into that web again. The next spell I'm going to take is Mirror Image. Again, this is a character that's going to be getting in close. I've got a good armor class, but we can scale our defenses, and Mirror Image is not requiring concentration, so it is a defense that we can scale with all our other defenses. And the final spell I'm going to be taking with my second level spells is Levitate. And Levitate is just a really versatile spell, and that's why I like it. It uses our concentration, but it might be a way for us to levitate out of a combat if we are in harm's way. And then we can still have a number of spells that do damage or grease the battlefield that aren't requiring our concentration. So there's still lots of things we can do while we're levitated. Another thing we might want to do is if we have an ally that's in trouble, Levitate can often get them out of trouble. And the final thing we can do is we can target an enemy with it. And if the enemy fails their saving throw, then we can potentially take them out of the combat or leave them helpless, floating in the middle of the air where we can defeat them with ranged attacks. And because we have the ability to move targets, Levitate can also be useful that way as well. So if I am able to levitate an enemy, I might then be able to Thorn Whip them to do damage to them and then maybe pull them into an effect. So now they're over top of the grease. So even if they come down, even if my concentration gets broken, then they're going to end up in an effect where they're going to need to make another save or have something else bad happen to them. So at 5th level, we're going to have now a lot of spell slots. We have 4 first level spell slots, 3 second level spell slots, and 2 third level spell slots. And because we are a 4th level wizard now, we would get 2 spell slots back after a short rest. And because we are a 4th level wizard now, when we get Arcane Recovery after a short rest, we would get 2 levels worth of spells. Now, when it comes to scaling our spells to 3rd level, there weren't a lot of good options for scaling 2nd level spells. Most of the 2nd level spells we took are just good spells. They aren't necessarily great scaling spells. So with my 3rd level slots, you might want to use them if you run out of 2nd level spells, just to cast any 2nd level spell. But if we do want to make use of scaling, our best bet is still probably Magnify Gravity. Though Magnify Gravity is a 3rd level spell, I don't think is all that great anymore compared to what we could do with actual 3rd level spells. So that is the end of the first part of this video series. We just finished talking about this build from levels 1 through 5, and in our next part we will talk about levels 6 through 11. So I hope you'll join me then.